Hi, I am Reverend Kathleen Rolenz, and I serve as the Interim Senior Minister of All Souls Church. The purpose of this video is to give you an idea of what I do and how things work at All Souls. All Souls is a large, complex, and can be somewhat confusing institution as to who does what and where to get answers. So I hope this video helps. The first thing you should know is that I am in a partnership with Executive Director Tracy Hughes Trotter. Together, we form the executive team. We are one body with two sometimes distinct, sometimes overlapping portfolios. We meet every week and we report directly to the board. Neither one of us is supervised or evaluated by the other. That's the board's job. And although ministers are considered generalists, meaning our work often spills over into many areas of church life, I have some key areas of oversight. Before I describe what those are, I want to add that your executive team sees our work through the lens of the eighth principle. There is no part of church life that is separate from that lens. We are regularly asking ourselves, who is the we who's included, who may be excluded? How do we bring racial justice and accountability to each aspect of our work? We hold ourselves accountable to the board and to the transformation team's work plan for the congregation and the staff. You might want to take a look at our staff organizational chart. It's posted under the About Us Governance tab on the website. This outlines who supervises whom and who is responsible for what. So, for example, you notice a broken door handle in the church. That's Tracy. You're upset by some language used in the worship service. That's mine. I think you get it. When I was hired, the board prioritized the following areas for my focus: preaching and worship, prophetic and public leadership, strategic leadership, staff leadership and supervision, pastoral care and rites of passage, and spiritual teacher. So I'm going to take a look at each one and just explain briefly what I do in those areas. Let's explore this question of how the church works in my relationship to each one of these. Let's take preaching and worship first. Although I am responsible for the quality of every worship service, I partner with music director Jen Heyman and Rochelle Rice and Leonard Starks, as well as the other ministers on staff, to ensure excellent worship every Sunday. So if you have a concern or complaint about the worship service, talk to the senior minister. However, remember that if you actually want something done about your complaint and it involves another minister or staff member, I can't carry anonymous complaints to another person. But I can process your feelings with you, and I can go with you to share your concern and support you so that we can figure it out together. Let's now look at prophetic and public leadership. This is generally where a settled senior minister would spend a significant amount of their time, especially in a city such as Washington, D.C. However, as your interim, this is not my primary focus. I can and do serve as a public point of contact and provide leadership at times of crisis, or be present or lead public witness. But overall, my work as your interim is more internally focused than externally focused. Strategic leadership, staff leadership, and supervision. The senior minister and the executive director are both understood to be head of staff. What that means is that I supervise the ministry and music teams, and Tracy supervises all office and building staff. We conduct annual evaluations. We alternate leadership of the weekly staff meetings. We help the staff to understand our personnel policies, our grievance policies, and to create a cohesive staff that is satisfied with their jobs. And if they're not, they have the assurance of the executive team to be heard and all concerns addressed promptly. We are also responsible for strategic leadership. Let me say a word about that. In our system of policy governance, the highest mandate is what's called the church end statements, or you call them goals. There are 4, and they can be found on in the governance documents on the church's website. From those 4 goals, your executive director and I have written our own interpretation of them and how we plan to work on those goals this year. You can find a copy of that document in the Ministerial Transitions link on the church's website. It's a little bit long, but I think it's a compelling read and absolutely fascinating. So we take those goals and we report on them every month to the board, and the board gives us feedback. That's called monitoring, of course. And maybe they say, well, we like what you're doing. Keep doing it. Or they may say, we don't think your interpretation and our interpretation are in sync. Let's talk. So we may adjust our goals somewhat. But they give us an annual roadmap. Now, sometimes people think, is that the strategic plan of the church? First, the interim tasks of transitional ministry form a kind of strategic plan. I have 5 key areas of interim ministry that I have to work on with you throughout my time. You've heard me talk about them. It's called the 5 tasks of 5 developmental tasks of interim ministry. And they are history, engaging with your history, exploring it, hearing stories, identity, who are you, where did you come from, what's important to you about your identity, leadership, helping to create and cultivate avenues for new leadership to emerge, connections, which is making denominational connections and resources, and future thinking, which is planning and preparing for the next chapter of your church's life. In addition to all of these interim tasks, you, the church, will be doing your own task. You'll be developing a process for calling your next settled minister or ministry team, and that is quite involved. Once that team is settled, I do expect that All Souls will be revisiting your end statements, which is a congregationally wide process. And it's an incredibly important process because it sets the blueprint for the next 5 years. But for now, we have a lot of joyful work to do to get you ready for your next chapter. Pastoral care and rites of passage are next. We are really blessed by having Reverend Louise Green with us this year, serving as the Minister of Congregational Care. But I do want to say care of the congregation is shared among both ministry and laity. I'm at a bit of a disadvantage since I haven't had the chance to meet all of you or to build relationships with all of you. And to be honest, the senior minister's role often demands a focus on institution building rather than pastoral care. But I just want to say, if you need a minister, if you want to process a life change, a grief, a sorrow, a concern, share a joy, that's what your ministers are here for. Reach out. Spiritual teacher. The interim senior minister offers spiritual teaching through worship, through services, through sermons, programs, and classes. I won't likely be leading pilgrimages or trips even post-COVID, but I will be supporting the spiritual life of the congregation by reminding us that we aren't a business. We're not even a nonprofit. We're a church whose central mission is to create a diverse, spirit-growing, justice-seeking community. I've been studying your governance system, your documents, your history, and conducting interviews with as many of you as I can. Do you have thoughts or suggestions or concerns about how things used to work at All Souls that I should know about, or how they work now? I'd really like to hear from you. Send me an email. Let's talk. So that's the balcony summary, but let me just give you a few little tidbits of information that you might find helpful. As you know, currently our business, all of our business, is being conducted virtually until it is safe to open. I currently live and work in Charlottesville, Virginia, which is only about 2 hours away from the church. I do plan to move to DC in July 2021, assuming we are back in the building either before or around then. But I have access to church files, the church answering machine, voicemail, so I'm completely accessible. So I hope this brief video has answered some questions about how the church works from the senior interim minister's perspective, and maybe it's brought up some new questions for you. Again, I'd love to hear from you. I continue to be delighted to serve this congregation as we walk, roll, stroll, run alongside one another into your as of yet to be revealed future. It's good to be with you folks. Thanks so much, and see you in church.